I feel like more heists need to effectively end in fireworks. Andor, episode 6. This has been happening with a number of things that I've seen in the last month or so, where the more I think about it, the more I like it. And I liked it on initial viewing. So already we're starting on good terms. I'm just like, yeah. So this is kind of the conclusion to the next little mini trilogy of episodes. I had heard, and this does seem to now confirm, that this first season at least is kind of 3 sets of 3 stories. So we had our initial 3 episodes, not 3 sets of 3 episodes forming a single story. That's what I meant to say. Anyways, we had our first set of 3 episodes, which was actually the premiere. They dropped all 3 episodes, and that covered him getting off of the planet he was on and doing his initial sort of hookup with with someone with ties to the rebellion. And now we have sort of the first actual job he does tied directly with the rebellion. And I'm not entirely sure what we're going to get next. I will be curious to see. Part of me does wonder if I suppose, like, marketing wise, it would have been a harder sell because extra long special things aren't as much of a thing in the US in general. But like kind of I kind of wonder what would have happened if they'd taken a cue from certain like British series, like say for instance Sherlock, where the episodes are basically feature length. It's basically an 80 to 90-minute movie per episode. And I kind of wonder how this would have played doing it that way because structurally, while they work as individual episodes, you aren't really getting much of a complete story until you get those 3 episodes together. I don't know. That's a random thought. I'm not saying that they should have done that, but I wonder. Anyways, so what's good in this? First of all, it has a number of things that any heist should have. It has tension that somebody in the group is going to drop the ball, tension that somebody in the group is going to get killed, tension that something unexpected is going to happen, the tension that it's all going to fall apart at any moment. And this gives me that tension, which is part of what I really like about heist stories. So that was really cool. There was some stuff that like initially I was like, okay. So like I can't remember what they were called now, but the natives on the planet who were doing their pilgrimage, I remember that they'd been mentioned before, but like we hadn't seen them prior to this. So part of me was like, they're getting a weird amount of emphasis, like considering we didn't see them prior to this. But then as it was going on and the scenes were contrasting between their ceremony, and by that point it had very firmly established what they feel about the empire. So while we don't get a translation of what their ceremony actually is, it's easy to imagine that they are taking a very rebellious stance directly in front of the empire, even though they themselves are not in a position to fight. At the same time that this heist is going on to help fund a proper rebellion. So that contrast worked really, really well. And it also lent to like one specific moment that I want to highlight, and it also ties directly into something else. Actually, I'll come back to that moment in a second, because what it ties into that I want to talk about is the guy. I don't remember his name. I'm bad with names. I'm sorry. But the guy who was on the base, who seemed to be like the immediate on the ground commander, who we'd seen the last couple of episodes, it turns out he's working with the rebels. I like that for multiple reasons. The first is they had sort of positioned and been filming and presenting him in a way that you were kind of most worried about him being the one who was going to find them out. Because one way that you can help build up that tension I talked about is to establish somebody on the opposing side who is good at what they do and attentive, which he had proved himself to be. So when he's like looking directly at this little group that includes Andor, and you're like, oh, yeah, it gave you that tension in the moment because you don't know yet. And now at the end, turns out he's working with them. Now that doesn't completely undercut what came before. If I were to go back and rewatch this, I bet you that tension would still be there, except now it's the tension of, oh my gosh, is he gonna get found out? And to bring it back to the pilgrims, as I had mentioned before, there's the moment where he's translating what the sort of the elder of this pilgrim group says to the visiting commander, and he translates it much more gently. I'm not going to say a million. I'm not going to say complete opposite of what the guy said, but the guy was pretty like was pretty clear about what he thought about the empire. But when this guy translated it, he translated more as a sort of a general platitude. That was something these folks say, because we'd seen them say it before, but like that's definitely not what he said. And in the moment when it happened, I had thought like, oh, okay, so he's just disrespecting this dude. He's not, the dude being the elder of the popes. He's just not going to pass on a note of defiance. It's kind of like an inherent fu, and you kind of had this look on the face of the elder that's like, you suspect he knew he had not been properly translated. Now, realizing that this guy is on the rebels and against the empire, now I'm realizing he didn't translate it properly so that there was no retaliation and they left these people alone. And that's the kind of stuff that is getting really layered in. And that's the kind of thing where a twist like that, because ultimately it doesn't alter the forward trajectory of that match because he doesn't live through it, but like it is a twist that alters what had come before in interesting ways, to an extent that if I had more time, I'd actually want to go back and watch it. I don't have the time, but like in my mind, a good twist makes me want to go back and rewatch it now knowing the thing. And this gave me that feeling. So I dug that. And then there's the stuff towards the end with the other guy who, again, name I don't remember, but he's the guy who got all up in Andor's face for being a mercenary and being paid to be there. It was like, we can't trust him. And then at the end, he's trying to bring Andor in on a conspiracy to steal all the money and split it 50-50. Now, Andor can't trust him even if he, had absolutely no sense of honor whatsoever, because, if a guy's prepared to betray these other people he was with, why would he not also betray you as soon as he got whatever he wanted from you? So, like, logistically, it would have been a bad idea anyway, but that never came across as to why he shot this guy. Andor was angry. Yeah, he was there for money, but he did the job he came for. He expected to get what he was offered, but that was it. He wasn't looking to rob anybody other than the Empire. And I think he kind of took this guy trying to recruit him really personally, especially given that this guy would have approached him because he assumed he'd go along with it because he's a mercenary. I think Andor took that really personally, and there's like little bits in the face of his performance like, oh, this isn't just like a calculated move that he's safe for killing you. Like, no, he's actually kind of ticked off and a little bit shaken by this. So I dug that. It was a surprisingly effective scene, showing the Senate with most of the seats empty and the people there not paying attention. It really does kind of emphasize that in some cases, while fascism, which the empire is fascistic, fascism will swiftly tear down certain things, but allow other things to slowly degrade. Things like the Senate, because the Senate gives the illusion of democracy. So there is a reason to keep it around, at least for a while, but to slowly let it degrade and fall apart until they just disband it, as we learn at the near the front end of A New Hope. And the thing is, this actually gives new context to that entire thing, where we find out the Emperor has dissolved the council permanently. Last remnants of the old republic have been swept away. Well, now that wasn't a power grab, that was house cleaning. He waited until the Senate was basically useless, and nobody was going to complain about it being gotten rid of because it didn't do anything anyway, and it was basically empty. That, again, shows a way of going about taking things over, because fascism, while it ultimately is it is a mode of thought, and it is a way of trying to control people that demands strength, or at least the image of strength at all times. That doesn't necessarily mean that fascists will do the the strong arm forward assault on all things. Fascism will do whatever gets them more and helps them then hold on to power. And if letting something die slowly is a cleaner way to do it, that's what they're going to do. Sometimes power is seized in a violent coup. Sometimes it is seized by undermining the existing institutions and then replacing them without very much fanfare. So yeah, that was a neat little touch. Just that scene, seeing the current state of the Senate, that worked really well. I don't know for sure where we go from this. I'm assuming they recruit Andor for another mission after this, but also like the visuals. I kind of mentioned at the front end that it's like they had fireworks to escape through. It was gorgeous. It was tense. It was thrilling. It was sad with some of these characters who died. Like I called pretty much all the characters who were going to die, not necessarily the circumstances under which they were going to die. Oh, the other thing. I can't believe I almost forgot to bring this up. It's a really interesting, fascinating narrative choice to have them kidnap, well, I mean, not kidnap in the sense of take away, but hold hostage and threaten to kill a child. Because these are our heroes. These are the good guys. And you like to think they wouldn't actually do it. But they've still traumatized the hell out of a kid who is not at fault in any way, shape, or form for anything that's going on. The kid's not even complicit. It's not his fault who he was born to. But they're going to do it anyways. Because that's what'll get the job done. And that was what I was hoping to see as Andor got. There were a couple things I was hoping for from the show. One was to keep things at the ground level and show the impacts on people. Normal people, not just generals and Jedi, but normal people on what it's like to live under the Empire. And that's another thing that the putting the Pilgrims in fed into. That was one thing I wanted. The other thing I wanted was to show the dirty side of war. And I think you have to be careful about not glorifying the dirty side of war. But the thing is, while there might be a bunch of, regal people planning tactics in pristine robes around a computer that we've seen like in the main trilogy, for every one of them, there's 100 people on the ground doing assassinations, planting bombs, poisoning people, and doing some really, really nasty work to get the job done. And this is a real good encapsulation of that. Like, it would have been too much for that kid to actually get hurt. But the fact that they were willing to put him in danger made me a little uncomfortable. And it should. Because the rebellion, especially at this point, is in such a state that it's going to do whatever it has to, including doing something that is frankly not okay. And then it makes you wonder, how far will they take it? Will we ever see a situation where Andor finds himself in a setup where he does not think that they should do what is part of the plan? He thinks it's too far, even if it gets the result. I don't know. This certainly feels like it opens up the possibility. That discomfort of just the wife of a military person, but more importantly, her child, putting them in danger, openly threatening to kill them, that's uncomfortable. And this is showing the side of war that is not comfortable, that is not glorious, that is dirty, and that is traumatic. So this, and like, here's, this is going to be a weird note to sort of wrap out on, but this, I think, is why ultimately part of how I feel at this point about The Last Jedi. Yes, I know. But part of how I feel about that is I don't have a problem with what it was doing in the broadest sense, in terms of how it was looking to redirect, undermine, or subvert certain things. I don't think an 8th entry in a mainline series was the place to do that. I think the things Rian Johnson had tried to do would have worked so much better in either one of the side films back when they were still doing those, like Solo or Rogue One, or in a series like this. Because I feel like at this point, the primary saga established itself as the grand story of the major players. If you want to undercut that, if you want to go ordinary people get hurt, if you want to go the rebellion and or the resistance is propping up horrible people because they get them the weapons they need. If you want to do that, that is not invalid to address. But I feel like the 8th film in the primary saga was the wrong place to do it. This is working so much better for me because it's being done here. Because this is uncomfortable. But Star Wars is also escapist. And I feel like, especially the main series of films, you should be able to take those in as escapist and fun and energizing and cathartic films. And the idea of undercutting that and giving people the dirty side of that, the uncomfortable side of that, I don't think it's invalid. But I think it makes way more sense to do it in a side project that people can opt out of if they don't want that to be part of their Star Wars experience. I, in this case, do want it in this setting because it's working for me in this setting. Whereas a lot of the attempts to subvert and dirty up and answer questions that aren't uninteresting, but I just felt they were not, Last Jedi wasn't the place to do them. But again, I've probably opened too big a can of worms even addressing that. But it was just something that occurred to me. I wanted to say it. So, Andor, episode 6. What do you think about this? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon's what pays the bills. Any amount that you can contribute is of immense help. Things are quite tight at the moment. But even if you can't, like, share, subscribe, help as well. I won't give you too much pressure on that, though, because we try and take a relaxed attitude around here so you can come on back next time you need a break. All right, time to thank my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Emu Delkey, Leotha Boyd, Toy Loli, Becky Sparks, Phrenobulax, The Poodle, Zach, Bookworm, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperol, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Shayla Gourlay, Brendan LaRose, and TT. Thank you for your support. If you want to hear me try and say your name while this little guy tries to chew on my earrings, well, you can check out the Patreon or the support tiers that get you a shout out. Thanks so much. You are a pain in my butt.